The Mountain, written by David MorningWay. Part 1, The Job. Alarm clock ringing loudly. The alarm clock woke Wade up with a start. He had been deep within his own dreamland, so the noise had brought him up a bit jarringly. However, a smile quickly appeared on his face, replacing the look of shock and annoyance. Today he started the Hawthorne job, and it would be at least 7 times more lucrative than any other past job. The widower, John Hawthorne, had hastily moved from a remote location deep within the Appalachian Mountains to a new location about as far into the Olympic Mountains of Washington State as one could possibly go. It was rumored that he just couldn't stand living in his isolated mansion without his wife any longer, so he found similar forest about as far away as he could possibly move to build or buy a new palace in paradise. This ideal had brought him to Washington State. The mini mansion he bought on top of a mountain was in bad need of a roof repair. This had brought him to Wade, or more specifically, Wade's weatherproofing and roofs, a business Wade had been running with great success for almost 12 years now. Locals knew you could hire a larger company for quicker work, but Wade offered better quality work at a slightly more reasonable price. This fact had made his small self-owned company quite popular with the locals. Living in Washington with its notorious weather, you wanted the best possible quality of roof available. Wade had prepared everything the night prior, from setting out his tools to be easily loaded into the 4-wheel drive work van, to presetting his coffee maker, to where one simple push of a button would take care of the whole process. This made his morning routine go by much faster, getting him on the road almost 45 minutes ahead of schedule. Wade always despised being in a rush, especially for more important matters, like today. He kept going over a checklist in his mind to ensure he didn't leave anything behind. Even though he had driven so far, he really couldn't turn around even if he wanted to. This job was a bit different than the others, due to the extreme remote location of the mansion in the Olympic forest. And yes, mansion was most definitely the right word for this marvel of constructive ingenuity he would be working on. It was 7 stories high on top of a mountain that Wade had never visited. The mountain was unnamed, so its geography couldn't even be located on any form of GPS. In other words, there was no proof that this mountain actually existed. But Wade had seen firsthand how rich people created their own laws in reality, so it didn't immediately alarm him. The location dwarfed all other mountain peaks surrounding the area, so to say he would be working high up was one heck of an understatement. Its architecture was unorthodox as well. Most mansions were wide and extra long to give the owner an open and large area simulating their own little private world. This creation traded all its width for height, perhaps to try and achieve the best possible view. This fact also made this job by far his most dangerous, and required Wade to purchase extra safety equipment, from a new body harness in case he would need to hang at odd angles, or God forbid, fall off. He also bought a couple of special, long hatchet-like tools he could stab into the roof if he was to start sliding off, similar to ice picks that mountain climbers use for relatively the same reason. Even though his titanium hammer had an extended claw on it, he was forced to put it to the test on a particularly high roofing job he did a couple years ago. He was walking down an unshingled part of the roof when he slipped on some loose nails he had spilt out of his tool belt. While falling down, he first attempted sinking his claw hammer into the wood, with only half luck, going in less than an inch before his body weight and momentum ripped it back out, continuing his unwilling descent. Only with God's grace, he often states, and every ounce of adrenaline and upper body strength, he was able to sink in the extended claw, thus stopping his fatalistic demise of human versus gravity with his feet just 11 inches from the roof's edge. After seeing how high up this roof was, he decided to buy the ice picks and put together some custom leather sheaths to holster them so he'd be able to pull them out quickly and safely if the need arose. He had also bought a cordless nail gun, which wasn't quite as powerful as the corded ones, especially the larger old model he called Biggin. It was extremely powerful, and it could fire off the 3.5-inch heavy-duty framing nails. Although the old model Safeguard, the piece of steel that prevents the nail from firing until pressed firmly down against the wood, had broken off, he was able to successfully spot weld it back on in working order, deeming it fit one last job before being replaced. He also thought it wise to bring his 12-gauge shotgun with both double-aught buckshot and grizzly slugs, which looks similar to a shotgun shell with a hollowed-out mini rocket inside. Real powerful stuff. The Olympic Forest is home to many large predators. Wade was going to be as far out in the wilderness of Washington as you could get. It was not far-fetched to assume he could run into trouble. After almost an hour of driving through the highways that transitioned into smaller local backroads and now gravel, he was about to reach the base of the mountain. In another 6 minutes he arrived, pausing at the entrance that was gated. He exited the vehicle and punched 0333 in the digital panel, which beeped 3 times before opening, to him almost soundlessly. He put his van in 4-wheel drive, took a sip of coffee, and began his long ascension up the mountain. Wade knew from coming up to price the job almost 3 weeks prior that the trip up the mountain would take the better part of an hour, so he put on a playlist of downloaded music to help ease the trip up. He would usually just rely on Spotify or Pandora to take care of his musical needs, but already knew that such things were useless out here, where data is most pointless and Wi-Fi practically non-existent. In preparation for this, he had downloaded hundreds of songs and podcasts to accompany him on the job. He let himself zone out on his trip upward, barely noticing anything around him as he enjoyed some of his favorite music over the past 30 years. Wade was 47 years old, so he had quite the wide variety of music he enjoyed over his lifetime, with his mind half wandering through random thoughts and half in whatever music was currently playing. Wade almost missed the large pair of antlers up on the hill by his right, above the gravel road. He only caught the tip of them before they were covered by shrubbery. He pressed on his brakes, bringing the vehicle to a slow stop as to not skid on the gravel, and optimistically waited for the antlers to reach the end of the thicket, hoping to catch a glance of the creature. After almost a minute of waiting, he thought it must have fled in another direction, and went to put his vehicle back into drive when his patience was suddenly rewarded. A massive buck had now slowly exited the thick brush and displayed itself proudly upon the hill for Wade to marvel at. It was above and beyond any buck Wade had ever seen. Not one record-breaking photo he'd ever seen online came even remotely close. This deer was bigger than any moose he'd ever seen, which was impossible. He hastily grabbed his phone to catch the beast on video. However, by the time it took him to get the phone ready, the beast was gone, now only existing in his memory. Sighing and letting out a few choice words, he continued his ascent. People just don't see things like that out their window every day, you know, thought Wade as he shifted through his current playlist of music, before deciding to go with a random audiobook to try to focus on something else. As he arrived to the second gate at the top of the mountain, preceding the estate itself, he once again exited his vehicle to punch in a digital code for entry, the only difference being that he typed 0999. After only a few dozen feet past the gate, Wade saw a man standing directly in front of the mansion's entrance with his hands clasped behind his back in a patient yet serious manner. The man was old, but in most excellent shape. I'm not saying he was in shape for his age, which was about 70 from his appearance. No, he was in shape for anyone's age. He was about 6'2", about 185 pounds, with a short military-style flat-top haircut that held 3 long lines on the right side of the haircut's fade, just above and behind the ear, and spanned about 6 inches, stopping just before it reached the very back of his head. As he approached closer to the gentleman, pulling in sideways so the driver's side door would face the man, he noticed in the slight awe that the lines on his head were in fact scars. This would be Wade's first actual time meeting Mr. Hawthorne in person, only having communicated through the phone or email before now. Even when Wade had priced the job, there wasn't a soul up here. Exhaling deeply, he put his most professional and courteous face on. He opened his door, smiling. Mr. Hawthorne, with his hand still behind his back, wore a slight smile, almost a smirk which, accompanied by the fact that he looked like his muscles were carved out of stone, gave Wade the impression of a great leader. Like someone made a perfect statue of an elder protagonist hero, Wade also felt a certain energy or aura as he approached the man. Like he had seen and done things Wade couldn't even imagine, and such things as roof repair were simply trivial to him. "Good morning, sir," Wade cheerfully exclaimed to him, outstretching his right hand to the man whilst approaching. The man's smirkish smile grew slightly wider across his face as Wade approached, giving the man a warmer and more welcoming demeanor. The man then held out his right hand as well, mirroring the gesture displayed by Wade, and also making him stop approaching suddenly with a shocked look on his face, making an expression that said, "What the heck am I looking at?" At first glance, Wade thought he was just wearing some kind of shiny glove. However, after just a few moments of true observation, did Wade realize, with no small amount of surprise, this was, in fact, his hand. A hand that could only be considered normal if he were the freaking Terminator. "It won't bite you," Mr. Hawthorne said comically, snapping Wade out of his stupor. "Sorry, sir," he said before completing the introductory gesture, shaking the man's unique hand. Mr. Hawthorne very gingerly shook Wade's hand, as if he were trying not to hurt him. "I've never seen a prosthetic like that, sir," said Wade. "It moves so fluently. I bet it must have cost a pretty penny, no doubt." "Here," said the man, both changing the subject and revealing his left hand, that had remained behind his back until now, his left hand both normal and holding a key. "This is for you," he said to Wade while handing it to him. "This will give you access to the first floor of the house, including all its amenities and supplies. There is plenty of food, bathroom, drinks, and pretty much anything you could possibly need. I even left a gun safe open in case, God forbid, you run into any trouble up here. It's not uncommon at all to see grizzlies and mountain lions this far out. On the way up the mountain, I actually saw the biggest buck I've literally ever seen in my life," said Wade excitedly. "It was unnaturally big and not afraid of my loud vehicle in the slightest, which is odd to say the least." This statement made Mr. Hawthorne's smile return again briefly before once again changing the subject. "I'll be gone for a few days, Wade. Everything you could possibly need will be on the first floor, and please help yourself to anything." "I only have one condition, son." "Yes, sir." "Anything you want answered, Wade. Call me John," the man said, grinning at him. After a few more minutes of exchanging pleasantries, John clasped Wade on the shoulder with his left hand, which, although normal, still had an iron-like grip, and told him to make himself at home and not to work too hard. Laughing at this while walking over to his oversized Range Rover, right before John grabbed the vehicle door handle, he turned back to Wade with an entirely serious look on his face and said, "Feels like there's a storm coming. A big one at that, son. You be careful and stay vigilant. Don't be shy about going inside. I think you might find some usefulness in there if such an event were to arise," John said as a matter of fact and almost hintingly. "Thank you, sir. John," Wade said, correcting himself. John took a step away from his vehicle door, looking directly into Wade's eyes, and said, "Some storms bring more than thunder and lightning, my boy." He then glanced down at his metallic hand before turning, entering his Range Rover, and departing. Wade simply smiled and waved, chalking the ominous comment up to a metaphor about how bad things can go wrong in life, and began his job. The first 2 days consisted of mostly moving supplies from his van to the roof, and tearing out the first of the weathered shingles and plywood. Wade had bought an extra long extension cord for the nail gun, so he could keep an air compressor on the ground while working anywhere on the roof, for he wasn't even about to consider lugging that heavy piece of machinery up 7 stories to the roof. Carrying the boards and shingles was definitely the most time-consuming part of the 2 days, and now, with enough building supplies in place, he could get down to the real work. It was only an hour and a half that went by until he needed a break. He had been punching in the large 3.5-inch framing nails with Biggin, and the weight was making his right arm burn from overuse at this point. After setting the large nail gun down, he raised his right arm and pulled it behind his neck with his left hand, stretching out the sore and tense muscles of his neck and shoulder. Sighing, he sat down on the side of the roof, facing his van, in the mansion's front entrance with the intention of enjoying his lunch break with a nice view. However, he quickly realized that his lunch was still in the van, so deciding to finally take John up on his previous offer, Wade thought he would eat his food on the mansion's first floor and check out the interior architecture. Sighing again at his own stupidity, he grabbed the ladder's edge and began to put his right foot on the first step to begin his descent down, before a loud crack sounded from the forest directly in front of the mansion. The noise made him stop before his foot ever even touched the ladder, and was quickly followed by more sounds of the same nature. The sounds, although loud, still seemed distant, so distant in fact that whatever was making the noise had to be very large, thought Wade. And his shotgun was in the van. Maybe I should stay up here until the noises rather go away, or come close enough to be identified, he thought. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to be in a hurry, for the cracks and crashes through the immediate woods before him moved methodically, and with some purpose. Could people possibly make that much noise whilst hiking through the woods, he thought? Maybe, if they were clearing a trail as they walked, but this is private property. The whole dang mountain, in fact, according to John. People get lost, Wade thought to himself. Maybe lost hikers, or even poachers. But the thought was instantly cut off as a pair of massive antlers appeared briefly in the tree line before the thick summer foliage covered them back up. Wade's breath caught with excitement, making him cough just a little before exclaiming, "It's him!" Wade reprimanded himself for yelling out loud and grabbed the phone from his back pocket. "I've got you now, my friend," he said, referring to the abnormally large buck he glimpsed and tried to record on his way up the mountain 2 days prior. "I can't believe I'm getting another chance to," but his thoughts were cut off yet again when, for the briefest moment, he saw 2 more pairs of unnaturally large antlers quickly following the first. 3 record-breaking bucks together at once. This wasn't right. And with that realization, a floodgate of even more peculiar things opened up and burst the carefully constructed dam of reason within his mind. That's impossible. The antlers. They can't be. The position the antlers were in was not possible. Not right. Wade had walked the property a few times by now, and even hiked a bit around the first day after work, and had gotten a good blueprint of the property in his mind by now. That's why he was so very alarmed, for the spot was easily 15 feet high, minimum, and they didn't move like deer, but shifted back and forth in ways only bipedal creatures could do. What is this? As if to answer Wade's internal questions, the first pair of antlers slowly emerged from the woods, along with what they were connected to. Wade had always heard people explain in movies and in books how a cold chill would run down a person's spine, or how their nerves or insides would turn to ice, freezing them in place. Contradictory to everything he had heard, Wade felt hot, like every single nerve in his body was screaming at his brain, the way a child would scream in trauma until their faces go red and hot, trying to convey storing emotions they cannot understand, let alone explain. This was hot panic, thought Wade. As the chorus of his nerves hit its panic crescendo, all the logic and reason left him, like being abandoned by your oldest and most reliable friend, and being left in the dark with the image of that face approaching, and the impossible implication of its name ushered with it. Monster. Wade was in the mid-crouching position in front of the ladder with his phone still in his right hand. The creature seemed to be scanning the immediate area, searching hard for something apparently, but it hadn't looked up yet. The roof was so high the monster would have looked extremely far up to see him, and if he laid flat, it probably wouldn't be able to see him at all. With this thought, he broke out of the hold that the inferno of shock had placed on him, and proceeded to lay flat, in order to stomach crawl to the nearest pile of shingles he'd carried up to the roof prior. Thank God I stacked all those in one careless tall pile, thought Wade appreciatively. Now, in a covered position, he let all the questions that were trapped in his fear-locked mind out, and had to try and slow them down willingly before he made any kind of sense. What is this thing? How did they get here so quickly when they were obviously so far away? No creature moves that fast, do they? Thought Wade anxiously. Did I die on this roof and those were literal demons coming to usher me to hell, he thought. No, I lived a good and decent life, hadn't I? He started breathing in and out slowly, checking his pulse while doing so. No, I'm definitely alive, and if I'm going to stay that way, I need to assess the full situation and come up with a plan, he thought logically. Realizing his phone was in his hand, he thought he should attempt to record evidence of this supernatural event, since he was fortunate enough to be stuck on a relatively safe vantage point. At least he kept telling himself he was safe, as to not send his already frayed nerves into a panic attack. Wade cautiously stuck his head out of the bottom left corner of the shingle pile, which stood about 4.5 feet high and about 7 feet wide. Every ounce of panic returned with a vengeance upon seeing the face again. It still remained in the same position, cautiously scanning back and forth with the other pair of antlers poised still behind him, like they were waiting for the all-clear signal from their leader. Wade couldn't even begin to comprehend what to do, so he just stayed there on the reef's edge, in a half-standing, half-crouched position, to fully take in the creature's appearance from his shield of roof supplies. An amalgamation of bone and muscle were his first coherent thought of a description. The unnaturally sharp and curved antlers led to a forehead of a skull, except for massive veins and a faint sinewy tendon that ran through the bone, making it look organic and alive, more like a living exoskeleton than mere bone. The side cheeks were mostly raw exposed and overdeveloped jaw muscle, with the same organic bone-like material piercing out in high sharp ridges through the cheek muscle. The rest of the head was covered in obsidian black fur, with rips here and there, where the muscle was so prominent it appeared to tear through the creature's skin. All this led down to a slightly elongated jaw that was wide, and ended more flatly round than actually just pointed, seeming to have both canine and feline characteristics for its mandible structure. This blended together with an unnerving yet undeniable human-like appearance that shared a similar marrow and muscle-type structure as its face. Its jaw was slightly agape as it sniffed and looked around the immediate area, revealing sharp teeth that were about 3 times longer than the smartphone in his hand, which he forgot he was even holding till now. He swiftly hit the power button on the side of the phone twice to engage the quick camera feature, and having to use both hands to control the nerves making his hand shake, he held the phone up to his face before his stomach dropped and heart began to pound. It was gone. He quickly lowered the phone to see how far or where they had gone, but to his complete surprise, they were all still there, their ghastly faces still scanning the area with the others still in tow, about 20 feet behind. Confused, Wade pulled the camera back to his face, just to be met with the same oddity, the same absence of what he knew to be there, and he saw with his naked eye. Up, down, they are gone, they are gone. He repeated the process like playing a demented and terrifying game of peekaboo with the creatures. His mind brought up paranormal television programs and creepy blurring internet pictures of cryptids and how it seemed impossible to get any good footage. Maybe these creatures can't easily be viewed by secondary means, like cameras, mirrors, etc., and how such a thing could even be possible. Wade sighed. After this, the realm of what's real and what's possible has been greatly widened, for the world's natural and supernatural were slowly becoming one and the same to him. His thoughts were converted back to the mindless panic, when a hand with fingers over half the length of his legs, tipped with long and slightly curved black claws, made an all too familiar gesture as to raise its arm up and moved sweepingly forward, just like a military captain who would silently gesture his men to advance ahead of him, making sure the coast was clear. Without a second of hesitation, the other 2 creatures followed their orders, with their heads now clearing the thick vegetation and stopping parallel with the first and now obviously larger creature, seemingly waiting for him to take the first move, and take the first move he did. Abandoning the caution it once held, The larger beast dropped on all fours, and with a scream, deep and roaring like a bear, but with a loud, crazed, maniac human edge on it. The creature began rampaging around the entire property, with the other two following behind. At first, Wade thought after their extensive sniffing and scanning that they had picked up his scent and were coming directly for him, but right before they reached the front of the house, the back two creatures swiftly ran around opposing sides of the mansion, while the first creature, an apparent leader, checked Wade's van, ripping the back door off like a gardener pulling a particularly weak weed from the earth, using no real effort at all. After inspecting the van's contents, it stood still, but vigil, checking the area while the others finished their frenzied search, coming back empty-handed. They all three stood still in the open now, and Wade could see their full and unhidden form in its all-magnificent horror. They more or less looked the same, except for the leader, who stood about 6 feet taller than the rest, with more muscle. The others also had a dark brown fur, where the leader was a Vanta black, void of darkness. Their torsos looked extremely skinny compared to their bulky upper body, but still lean, like it was impossible for them to hold any fat anywhere. In fact, their stomachs looked extremely malnourished and thin, which contrasted hard against their muscles. Their arms were so unnaturally long, and their claws almost raked the ground as they walked on 2 legs. Their hands, oh God, their hands, thought Wade fearfully, were so extremely large and out of symmetry with the rest of their body, that they could wrap the entire torso of a bull moose, and with their ridiculous strength, probably crush it in half with one hard squeeze. Its skin was so tight in places on its shoulder, chest, back, and arms that muscles ripped through their fur and flesh. The best way you could simply describe it was if someone took a human, a demon, and about a dozen forest creatures and combined them into a single abomination. All Wade could think of now was how very easily those massive claws could scale the mansion and find him, cowering behind a stack of shingles without a weapon, or a hope. He grabbed at his still holstering ice picks, thinking if he could be any match at all against those wholly destructive and enormous claws. Not with that reach of theirs, he thought drearily. If only I had my gun, thought Wade, and then a small, hopeful realization came into his mind. Biggin! He slowly crawled on his stomach again to reach the nail gun, and after grabbing it, he cautiously moved to the hose still connected to the air compressor, as to not to move too much, alerting the monsters to his existence. Wade knew the safety guard was barely spot welded on, and with the right amount of applied leverage, it would snap right off, effectively making it a 3.5-inch nail shooting projectile weapon. Yes, he thought, this was a sound plan and would work fine, as long as the pressure hose stayed attached to it. Oh no. He started to internally panic. No! Since the arrival of his unnatural and unwanted guest, the air compressor had yet to turn on, and it, like clockwork, needed to recompress the air about every half hour, depending on how much was used. The creatures appeared too intelligent not to figure out what was going on if and when the air compressor kicked on. His thoughts were temporarily halted as one of the creatures opened its mouth and spoke. Not like a person, though. It merely opened its jaw, and without moving its mouth an inch, a voice crept out like an ominous gust of wind, sounding both smooth and gravelly, not at all organic or alive, like the ghost of a voice. He must have known But the beast was cut off by the loud compression of air given off by the machine's function engaging. All 3 creatures instantly looked at the machine and slightly advanced upon it. After their gazes followed the cord from the machine to the roof, the leader nodded at one of the others before he began to sink his claws into the mansion walls and started scaling upward. The monsters didn't make it more than 2 seconds before the walls lit up with bright blue runes and massive bursts of blue energy, violently propelling it off the wall, sending the beast soaring about 100 yards before it hit the ground, barely conscious and slightly on fire with blue flames. The flames went out quickly, however the creature took a bit longer to recover from the blast. Wade had no clue as of what could have saved him in such a manner, and looked around sporadically to see if God or angels had actually answered his prayers. If so, there was nothing here now, except for a blue glowing light issuing from the front of the house, quickly fading as the seconds went by. The monster who had made the vicious scream of pain and rage when the mansion defended itself was now breathing heavily, trying to gain his strength and composure back.
"It's protected,"
exclaimed the leader.
"How?"
remarked one of the other creatures.
"The Boundary Warden could not have done this so quickly, unless he had help," said the leader curiously.
"Yes," spoke the now recovered creature as it rose once again on the two legs like the others.
"I've smelt ripe human flesh since we have arrived." "Indeed," said the leader. "Judging by the van and the equipment, I'd say it's a normal human from the other side." And at this statement, the other two creatures bellowed out in a yipping, screaming-like manner that sounded similar to hyenas, but with a demonic and slightly static-sounding undertone. Wade assumed this to be their laughter, and instantly knew the utter alien and unnerving noise would haunt his nightmares for years to come. "Wrong place, wrong time indeed, little rabbit,"
mocked the leader as the maddening, heinous laughter increased to such a volume that Wade could feel the noise rumbling within his chest, like he was laying next to a subwoofer that was pulling straight noise from hell itself. Quickly the leader went silent and snapped his head at one of the other creatures, and then to the treetops. Nodding once, the creature swiftly started climbing the tree, and halfway up, Wade realized in a panic what was happening. It was checking the roof. At that height, his shingle pile would be next to useless as cover, he thought while he was desperately searching around for a miracle. There, Wade thought, and without the time to second-guess himself, he half-crouched, ran, and then crawled the last few feet to the large blue tarp covering his work from potential bad weather, and slid down under it, covering up with one quick and fluent movement. He had even held his breath to keep the tarp from making even micro-movements, and stayed like that for what felt like minutes, before he was forced to start breathing, doing it slowly to still minimize any movement from the tarp. After a few minutes that felt like a few hours, he heard the creatures hit the ground with a very soft thud. Had it simply jumped down, thought Wade. That tree was about 200 feet.
"Search the woods. He can't be far,"
Wade heard the leader order before he heard the sound of the beast run away on all fours into the night. "Thank you, God," Wade said mentally before beginning to breathe normal again. Darkness was starting to fall now, and Wade had to face the reality that he was spending the night on this roof, trapped above hell in the middle of nowhere and on top of the mountain that wasn't even located by GPS. In fact, Mr. Hawthorne's assistant had to physically drive him up here due to the fact that it was also not on any maps. Wade dismissed this at first because it was such a remote location, but now he had to wonder if there was more to it. He turned his phone off to save the 81% of battery he had remaining, and got as comfortable as he could under the tarp, clutching Biggin like a security blanket, and let his mind wander, silently thanking the heavens that it wasn't winter. After seeing such impossibly traumatic and horrifying things, it was unthinkable to assume he was going to find any kind of sleep tonight, or at least that's what he genuinely thought. After hours of hard work and then going into a state of near shock directly after, his body had tired itself physically and mentally. Combine that with white noise of the air compressor sounding off periodically, Wade soon found himself being lulled into unconsciousness after about 3.5 hours. In his most unconscious state, he began hearing a hum of machinery, which he assumed to be just the air compressor, until the slow buildup of the humming increased enough to snap him out of his slumber. He awoke alarmed and slightly confused, until all the scattered thoughts of the previous night came coherently together. At the same moment his recollections became clear, so did the mechanic humming sounds that awoke him. He identified the sound at the exact same time he heard the lumbering footfalls entering the forest. He shimmied back over to his trusty shingle pile and witnessed the creatures retreating from the sound, from a vehicle Wade now knew from his work schedule in small talk with John to be the electrician. For a split second, Wade thought he was saved, that they were running away and giving up, that the real world was coming to chase off the nightmare fantasy, one and all would go back to normal, and he could escape this darn mountain and return to the safe real world. No, 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 Wade said under his breath. They're not retreating. As the monster stopped about 30 feet within the forest and crouched beside some trees, kneeling the way a sprinter would position themselves before a race. No, no! They were ambushing them. Wade felt utterly helpless as the large work van, similar to his own, pulled into the driveway. He could see 2 men inside the van, an overweight balding white man, and a young Hispanic man with good looks and a lean build. The van had a metal wall separating the front seats with the equipment in the back, much like Wade's van, except the wall was solid instead of being a see-through mesh gate like his own, and it apparently had a door and could be accessed from the front directly, where Wade had to exit his van and go through the back doors. Wade saw the young Latin man enter the metal doors and disappear in the back, shutting the door behind him as the bald man inspected paperwork up front. The creatures moved so quickly, they were an effective blur, moving from being crouched in the woods to standing in front of the van before the noises of them violently exiting the woods even reached Wade's ears. They just moved faster than sound could travel, without even issuing a sonic boom, thought Wade hysterically. How though? Wade had seen them sprint around the property when his nightmares first began, and yes, they were unnaturally fast and frighteningly quick, but this was a whole other level of supernatural. If Wade did not hear the trees ripping and physically see them fall, succeeding the creature's advance, he might have assumed they just teleported from the woods to the van. Before a comprehensible thought could pass through Wade's mind, the van's front windshield was shattered, along with the bald man's head. With one oversized hand, the leader reached into the van's cab and threw what was left of the man's body to the other beast. Without pause, it devoured the man's body in just a few wet, squelchy and crunchy bites, yipping in its hyena-like fashion as the leader inspected the other vehicle. Apparently satisfied, the leader walked over to the other creatures, who had finished off all remaining bits of the man.
"He should have returned hours ago,"
said the leader, with his tone now slightly less intense as the night before.
"Should I go search?" "No,"
shouted the leader, silencing the other's query.
"We're stronger together, and the Master Eelrock will arrive this nightfall. When that happens, no amount of protection, rather magic or muscle, will stand in our way."
Their ghastly voices slowly faded as they began walking into the woodline surrounding the property, which was basically the entire mountaintop. In another few minutes, they would be at the farthest corner of the property. Wade reached into his right pocket and brought out the keys that John had left him 3 days prior, and stared at them intently. This was going to be the best shot at making a move I was going to get, thought Wade. As he crawled over to get Bigham and survey the situation from a closer vantage point, Wade caught movement out of the corner of his right eye. "The other electrician," Wade mentally exclaimed. Due to the intense horror of everything that had just unfolded, he completely forgot about the other man. Apparently going to fetch supplies from the back had saved his life. Fortunately, the man was smart enough to stay hidden and quiet in the back until an opportunity arose. This opportunity. Wade saw the upper half of the man's body peeking through the metal door that separated the cab from the back. The cab was completely covered in gore, and Wade could see the shock of the young man's face as he cautiously waved his arms back and forth to get Wade's attention. Wade acknowledged him with a thumbs up and quickly started trying to sign his plan to the man as best he could. Wade used his hand to make a fist next to his phone, and then pulled his fist away whilst opening his palm, trying to convey and emulate an explosion of noise. Wade made a gesture that looked as if he was going to throw his phone like a frisbee towards the direction of the creatures. He then pulled the keys out and pointed down to the front door of the house, letting the man know he had direct access to the mansion. Wade had to repeat this signing process several times until the man gave 2 enthusiastic thumbs up to convey that he understood the plan. Wade held up 5 fingers and then pointed to his wrist to simulate a watch, then counted his fingers out from 1 to 5, and then pointed to him, the young man, and the front door again, trying to make him understand that they were both making a move on the count of 5. Wade only had to sign this gesture twice this time in order for the young man to comprehend. After both parties were fully aware of the shared plan, Wade steeled himself, and with one deep breath in and out, he began the countdown. 1. Wade kept a steady eye on the creatures to make sure that they were still far enough away. 2. He firmly grasped Biggin in his right hand, putting his finger over the trigger, but not on it, the way he'd seen soldiers do in movies, so they didn't accidentally commit friendly fire or self-harm. 3. He made sure the hose connected from the air compressor to the nail gun was free of any tangles before putting his right foot forward on the ladder. 4. Wade looked down at the young man and nodded as he reciprocated the gesture to Wade in a mutual understanding of what was about to happen and its possible consequences. 5. Throwing caution and coherent thought behind, Wade raced down the ladder. Thanks to nailing the ladder down, he was able to descend it much easier than normal, skipping steps and abandoning them altogether about 10 feet from the ground. He jumped. After he descended to the ground, his nail gun hitting the earth directly after his feet, he quickly held it with both hands and turned left to inspect the beast's position. They seemed to be in the process of turning around at the same time Wade did, forcing him to make direct eye contact for the first time. For an uninterrupted few seconds, Wade and the leader just stared into each other's eyes from a great distance. Well, Wade stared into something, for there appeared to be no eyes, just large vacant holes of Fanta black, so ominous and deep, that for a moment he thought he was staring into the pits of hell. In the monster's all-consuming gaze, Wade was overcome with an unparalleled dread that if he was eaten by this abomination, that his very soul would become so corrupt in the demon's gut that he would never see heaven or any afterlife that wasn't completely damned. Before Wade could drown in this overwhelming hopelessness, a hand grabbed his right shoulder. "Come on, man, get the key, come on!" Wade snapped out of whatever trance he was in, like someone dumped a bucket of ice water over his head. "Here!" Wade thrusted the keys in the young man's hand. "I'll cover you, open her up!" Wade held up Biggin and started inching back, toe to heel, again mimicking soldiers that he'd watched on television. The monstrous leader let out another loud manic roar, which rattled Wade's very organs and almost blurring his vision, like the creature was screaming inside of his very body and soul. He thought about how quick the monsters had ambushed the electrician and wondered if this was all futile. The leader took off and was heading at them about 60 miles per hour, an incredible speed, but not at all impossibly fast. While the leader roared in hateful rage, the other creatures yipped manically in excitement, savoring the chase to come. Wade had backed up all the way to the door, where the young man was still fumbling with the keys. "Hurry, boy!" yelled Wade while firing a barrage of 3.5-inch steel framing nails, which slowed the creatures down to about 35 miles an hour, but it wasn't enough. They were mere seconds away. With a clawed hand bigger than Wade's entire upper body raised for the kill, the creature closed the distance at the same time that a strong pair of hands pulled Wade inside the threshold, missing his flesh and destroying the nail gun instead. The young man went to slam the front door shut, but was hindered as the tips of the 4 fingers stuck through, blocking the locking mechanism and the doorknob. With no time to spare or hesitation to have, Wade unsheathed his right ice pick, and with 2 mighty swings, 3 of the fingers fell to the floor, as the remaining digit retreated back. Before anyone could even breathe, the young man shut the door and locked it. Upon the door's closing, about 3 dozen runes lit up around the door with a blue glow. Simultaneously, the same blue glow lit up outside, followed by the familiar shrieks of agony by the monsters. Protected indeed, Wade thought to himself, recalling the leader's prior statement about the mansion. Wade now understood what happened when the monsters tried scaling the walls of the house the previous day. Both men laid on the floor panting before the young man spoke. "What the heck? What the heck? What are those things? What were those lights? What the heck is happening? What the..." The young man's breath was becoming increasingly rapid. Why? His breathing started transitioning into panic as he breathed faster and more frantic. "Slow down," said Wade, calmingly. "You're in shock, and if you don't try to calm down, you're going to." But it was too late. The young man who Wade could see was named Daniel from his name tag was starting to hyperventilate into a panic attack. Wade slowly helped him to his feet, where he was half carrying, half walked him to the couch, where he insisted Daniel to lay on his side with his hands pressed between his knees and just focus on taking slow, deep breaths. He left Daniel to his breathing exercise and began to pilfer around the house looking for a satellite phone or anything that could be useful to them. Wade remembered Mr. Hawthorne telling him about leaving a gun safe opened and began searching around with more enthusiasm. The mansion's first floor was a giant one with wide open space, like a loft, but much larger and extremely high class. It was adorned with expensive statue-like art, most of which depicted angels fighting demons, with the latter being defeated in a very elaborate and dramatic way. The room's centerpiece looked like it would be more in place in a Roman cathedral than some random mansion on top of a mountain. It showed 4 angels, much larger than any of the rest in the mansion, with the earth in the middle, like a detailed statue of a globe. Each angel stood on a specific axis of a compass, like north, south, east, and west. Next to each directional point was a name. They read, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Wade recognized Michael and Gabriel as archangels from the Bible, but had never heard the last 2 names. They must be archangels as well, he thought. Upon closer inspection, he also noticed an element under each name as well: air, fire, water, and earth. This brought Wade to an epiphany. Well, no wonder Michael had a flaming sword, and sure enough, under the name Michael was the element fire. There were only 6 rooms in the open first floor, a bedroom where Wade found a 9mm Beretta and a few clips, a locked door, 3 bathrooms, and a door Wade had yet to check. Besides a little coughing, Daniel had not made a sound, so Wade decided to check up on him. He was sitting up now, seemingly more relaxed and holding something in his right hand. Before he reached Daniel, he saw him put whatever was in his hand to his mouth as a green light lit up, followed by the sound of deep inhalation. "Well, this explains the coughing," said Wade, smiling. "Feeling any better?" he asked. Exhaling, Daniel tried handing Wade the vape. "Pure indica," he said, noticeably calmer. "Maybe later," Wade answered truthfully. "How are you not freaking out right now?" asked Daniel. "Oh, I had a few panic attacks on the roof already," said Wade. "Wait," Daniel stated. "How long have you been up there?" "Almost 24 hours, replied Wade. "Dang," responded Daniel, in a shocked yet sympathetic tone. "There's supposed to be a gun safe the owner left open." "Is that where you got that?" said Daniel, pointing at the 9mm tucked into Wade's belt. "No," replied Wade. "Found this in the bedroom." "No crap," exclaimed Daniel, excitedly. "I'm gonna go check it out." "I think this was about it, but knock yourself out. It's the room on the back right." As Daniel made his way to search the bedroom more thoroughly, Wade ventured to the last room on the first floor, hoping that it would not be locked. For the first locked room was a steel locking mechanism on a steel frame, or more simply put, it was kickproof and adorned with high-tech security locks. As Wade made his way to the last door, he began noticing a familiar sight next to the right side of the door: a safe. He picked up his pace as he closed in on the safe, noticing a small gap where the door had indeed been left open by John. The safe was about 7 feet tall, giving Wade hope that this was indeed the gun safe due to its size. "Yes!" hissed Wade in confident excitement, for after opening the safe door the rest of the way, he laid his eyes upon a beautiful sight. There were 9 in total: 2 rifles, 2 shotguns, 3 assault rifles, and another 9mm Beretta, and one particularly intriguing Magnum, a .44 Colt Python with shiny silver metal plating and a black, ergonomical grip. Along with the weapons was about 2 or 3 dozen boxes of various ammunition. Wade pulled the Beretta from his waist and replaced it with the Colt Python. Before he yelled for Daniel to come join him in arming themselves, he thought it wise to inspect the remaining room beforehand. As he reached for the door handle, something happened that startled him and made him retreat a few steps back. Wade removed the magnum and readied it, pointing it at the door while silently praising himself for already loading it, for when he previously reached the door handle, it opened itself. Standing back and peering into the small gap left when the door opened, he stood, gun raised, and waited for anything. For in this new and frightening world that previously only existed in his worst nightmares, anything was now possible. However, what came out of that door was not at all what Wade had expected. It wasn't even a physical being at all. "Wade, can you hear me?" said a voice that crept its way through the gap in the door, a voice he faintly recognized. John? Wade finally stammered out. "Yes, my boy. Come in, both of you. Please come inside, for there is much we have to discuss." Wade inched his way into the room, gun raised. He only made it 2 steps in the brightly lit room before lowering his gun, and his jaw along with it. "Oh my gosh," said Wade in complete awe and surprise. "That's right, my boy. If we are to survive this night, then God is, and always, our greatest ally," said John's face, which was being displayed through what looked like a 200-inch flat screen on a far wall, up high and directly in front of him, about 100 feet away. The room was unnaturally bright and white, much like the super high-tech labs you see in science fiction movies. It spread about 100 feet long and 70 feet wide, with a long rectangular, mostly transparent table that spanned the length of the room. The left side of the room's walls were composed of monitors, computers, and one long desk, built in the wall below, all seemingly being some sort of security monitoring station. All Wade's attention was pulled towards the right wall, though. That was nothing short of an armory. He glimpsed at every gun imaginable, from an AK-47 to freaking rocket launchers, and that was just the recognizable weapons. About 40% of the arsenal's contents were made up of items and weapons Wade had never seen before, or never knew to be real at all. There were guns that looked purely of alien design, staffs with glowing orbs adorned at the top of them, swords, spears, and axes with glowing runes engraved in the top of them that bore a similarity to the protection runes he saw upon the door being shut and activating the mansion's defenses. Wade even saw spherical glass-like containers that were filled with water and wrapped in silver bands covered in elaborate crucifixes, which he assumed to be holy water. John watched Wade patiently from the monitor, smiling his smirkish smile as Wade took it all in. "You found it!" a voice loudly exclaimed from the outside of the door, as he heard Daniel sorting through the various guns within the normal gun safe, just around the corner from the open door. "I don't know what you're doing in there," Daniel said as Wade heard his voice moving closer to him. "But what right now could possibly be more important than Daniel's voice paused abruptly upon entering the room, and slowly finishing his initial statement a few seconds later, taking in the impossible sight. "Wade, Daniel," John's voice sounded through the speakers that circled the entirety of the room's upper walls. "Now that you're both here, we have much to discuss, my friends." "How do you know my name?" asked Daniel. "Your name tag, son," replied John at the same time, Wade pointing to the identification badge on the upper right portion of the young man's company shirt. "Oh, right," replied Daniel nervously. "All will be explained. Well, as much as you need to know at least," John said, correcting himself. "You boys grab a seat and get comfortable. This won't be a short story, and we will only have nightfall to prepare for the storm of hell that blows this way." "Something tells me that when you say hell, you're not talking about the frozen balls of ice," said Wade, as he sensed a change in John's demeanor, noticeable even though through the screen his face was projected on, the kind of change that comes over a person when you're about to be 100% serious with you and cast all bullcrap aside. "Have a seat and let's get started," said John, as more of an order this time than a request. The two men took their seats and waited patiently for John to begin.